Hi, let's talk about media and communication. In the digital world, kids are constantly exposed to advertising, but are they really equipped to understand it? I have invited Sophie Borman from the University of Amsterdam and Wageningen University in Research to explore the concept of advertising literacy and uncover the effectiveness of pictograms, those small symbols designed to warn kids about sponsored content. We discussed Sophie and colleagues' groundbreaking study that investigated the impact of these pictograms on minors' advertising awareness and understanding. So the question really is, how do we create really informed online consumers? I'm Rodrigo Silva. Let's talk about media and communication. Sophie, welcome to our episode.
Thank you.
Sophie, there is an ongoing debate now on how to create safe, transparent digital environment for minors. And I believe this is where the relevance of your study lies into. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think children are exposed to a lot of advertising that is a bit hidden in content that they want to consume, such as influencer content. And we know that, the idea is that children are particularly vulnerable to these types of hidden advertising tactics because they find it very difficult to recognize, especially because they have limited information processing capability and advertising literacy.
Mm-hmm. Let's follow up a bit on that. I read your article and you cite research showing that minors have limited information processing capacity, which may, in consequence, limit their advertising literacy. So what was missing in the research specifically that you wanted to address?
So we did some studies before in which we tried to develop different ways of creating transparency about influencer marketing. And in one of these studies, we created different pictograms in cooperation with children and also by studying them and asking children about these pictograms. Mm-hmm. But in the end, we found that we did an experiment in which we showed children different influencer YouTube videos with these pictograms. And we found that children actually rarely noticed them, and therefore they didn't have a lot of effect. And we wanted to find out how can we increase the effectiveness of these types of pictograms, because we did develop them together with these children, so they should be quite effective. And we thought, okay, maybe we need to inform them and make them more familiar with these pictograms, and maybe an awareness campaign can be helpful there, because if children are more, or if people are more familiar with pictograms, we are more likely to notice them, and then it's more likely that they have an effect. So we wanted to find out if an awareness campaign could increase the effects of these pictograms.
Well, then let us know, what did you find and the insights of that?
Yeah, so what we did is we tested two different pictograms and we created an awareness campaign informing children about these pictograms and what they meant and why they were used. And we incorporated them in an experiment and made children watch sponsored YouTube videos either with or without this awareness campaign. And what we found is three important things. One of them is that minors were actually quite capable of distinguishing the sponsored content in the videos when we asked them explicitly. So they do have some level of advertising literacy here, which is something that we were very happy to see, because we always think that they're very vulnerable. But if we asked them, then they were actually quite capable of understanding that there was advertising in the sponsored videos. And what we also found again is that the pictograms were hardly noticed and also had little effect on their conceptual and attitudinal advertising literacy. So they didn't increase recognition of advertising. They didn't make the children more aware of the intent, and they also didn't make them much more critical. But we did find that one of the pictograms actually made them less critical towards the influencer advertising, which is something that we found before, that usually children appreciate transparency, so they appreciate these pictograms, but they don't really care about the advertising that they're informing about. And most importantly, I think we found that this awareness campaign did not necessarily lead to higher recognition of the pictogram, so it didn't increase the attention to the pictogram, which we hope to find, nor did it enhance advertising literacy. What we did see is that this awareness campaign could really increase the understanding of the pictogram. So even though most of the children did understand in some way what the pictogram was trying to inform them about, this awareness campaign did increase this. So they were more capable of understanding what this pictogram was trying to communicate to them.
Let's talk about practical consequences of this, either for children, for parents, for lawmakers. So I'm curious to know more about that.
Yeah, so based upon our findings, we argue that the way that these pictograms are used right now, or the way that we try to communicate to children that there's advertising in videos, is hardly effective because they don't notice them. So we thought maybe an awareness campaign can help. And I think we do see that there's some potential here because it does increase, for instance, the understanding. But we need to find out, this was just the one exposure, right? And only one exposure to the pictogram. So I actually think that this study shows potential in using such an awareness campaign and also in using these pictograms, but that it needs to be repeated. And also this pictogram, people need to be familiar with it and have to see it more often to really use this as information, as a cue to think about what is it, is this video advertising or not. And what we also see is, because this is something that we find in this study, but also in previous research, is that these disclosures, these types of pictograms, they can be very useful, but again, they are often not noticed. So what we say is, if you want to create a safe and transparent digital environment for minors, we should definitely use these disclosures to create transparency, but we should also combine it with other ways of informing children and increasing their advertising literacy, and making also influencers and advertisers more aware of their responsibility of clearly communicating what is going on and why some content is commercial and advertising and why others is not. And I also wanted to add that I think one very positive finding is that we did actually develop a pictogram that children understood and also appreciated. So I think, again, I want to emphasize that I do really think that these types of disclosures, these pictograms, do have potential here. And that's especially if you create them together with children, they can be very useful.
Of course. And what would you recommend future research should focus on? So more practical cases with children, other platforms. What are we looking at now?
Yeah. So there's much more to explore. I think one of the key here is to find disclosure implementations that actually attract the attention. So should they be bigger, longer, more repetition? That is something that future research could investigate, also using, for instance, eye tracking to see what people are looking at when watching these videos. And definitely we focused only on YouTube videos here. And we know that children children spend a lot of time on TikTok as well and other social media. So we can definitely extend it to these types of platforms. But yeah, I think main focus here should be on improving attention to these types of transparency measures.
Sure. This has been, Sophie, an episode very straight on point, as we like it. But if you had to compress this conversation in one or two sentences in a punchline, what would it be?
I think what I want to, in one or two sentences, I think if you want to help children understand that some content might actually be commercial, we need to transparently disclose this. And I think pictograms can be a way to do this, but we definitely need to explore how, and we need to make sure that people actually notice them.
All right, Sophie, thank you very much.
No problem.
This podcast is powered by Cogitatu Press. You can listen to this episode on the Let's Talk About Media and Communication website, on Cogitatu Press YouTube channel, and whatever you get your podcast.